like that because sometimes it goes click, 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 and it's always a problem. Good morning. For our opening song today, Can I See Another's Woe? Can you rise if you are able? We'll begin our song. Please be seated. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Venice. Among ourselves, we shorten it to the name UCOV. I'm Dale Pavenmeyer. I'm here today because I had the good fortune of making the initial contact with our guest minister. At UCOV, we strive to be a beacon of liberal religion on Florida's Suncoast and a refuge for all who seek a welcoming community, no matter your color, creed, who you love, your political affiliation, or religious belief. We learn from one another because of our diversity. You can learn more about us on our webpage at ucov.org. That's uucov.org. We're glad you've chosen to come join us this morning. The ushers will be passing the baskets while I make the announcements. We have a lot of announcements this morning. First announcement. In addition to the regular collection, there will be a collection basket on the lanai this morning for the International Rescue Committee for Ukrainian Relief. Immediately after the service, our President Pamela Palmer will, and after a quick break after the service, our President Pamela Palmer will have a congregational conversation. She'll be available to answer questions about our search for a settled minister. Then, at 2 p.m. today, the Community Forum Committee has arranged a showing of the film Capernaum, which several people in our congregation have seen. It was the third one, contending one of the third top films for Oscar for foreign films. It won a special citation at the Cannes Film Festival. It's highly recommended by the Canarellis, who've seen it 5 times. So at 2 p.m., we will have a special showing of that film here in the sanctuary. Tomorrow, Monday, March the 7th, the walking group meets at 9 a.m. at Pinebrook Park. The writers group meets at 1 p.m. The arts and crafts group meets from 1 to 4. And the Meatless Monday participants gather at 5 p.m. in Waters Hall for their weekly potluck. Once a month. For their monthly potluck. On Thursday, March the 10th, the book club will meet on Zoom at 1 o'clock. And the March book is The Mapmaker's Wife, The True Tale of Love, Murder, and Survival in the Amazon. And then, for next Sunday, we have the announcement that there will be a discussion and question and answer following the service at 11, following the service. So at 11:15, the discussion will be about pursuing a possible partnership between UCOV and the Blue Lotus, which could, with UCOV's support, lead to a temple on our property. Monk San and Kathy King from Blue Lotus will be here for the discussion. If you are visiting us for the first time, we hope you might stand and introduce yourself and tell us where you are from. But first, I'd like to start it off with a word of welcome to Margie Nelsen, wife of our guest minister. I've learned that she has a master's degree in social work and extensive leadership experience with civic organizations. Would you like to stand, please, the congregation? Our guest minister for the month of March is the Reverend Dr. William C. Nelsen. His outstanding career is so varied that I can only touch on the highlights. Since 2004, he's been a senior consultant for the Registry for College and University Presidents. This is an organization of highly qualified educators, qualified and experienced educators who can step in on short notice to fill unexpected vacancies on an interim basis while the institution does a search for a longer-term replacement. Prior to joining the registry, he earned a master's degree in religion and ethics from Columbia University and the Union Theological Seminary. He then went on for a PhD in political science from the University of Pennsylvania. He was vice president and academic dean at St. Olaf College for 7 years. If anybody's ever watched the Christmas Carol programs on PBS, you've either seen the Mormon Tabernacle Choir or the St. Olaf Choir. For 18 years, he was president of Scholarship America, which has turned out to be the largest private sector scholarship organization in the country. As a member of the registry, he has served as interim positions at North Carolina Wesleyan College and at Tennessee State University. From 2016 to 2018, he was interim president of the Episcopal Divinity School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. In addition, he has served as pastor of several evangelical Lutheran churches in Minnesota. He's authored numerous books and articles on higher education and religious subjects. Last year, he published his most recent book, Embracing Diversity, encouraging America to embrace, not fear, growing diversity. I now turn the pulpit over to our guest minister, who wishes to be known by the title of Pastor Bill Nelsen.
We turn now for a moment to our prelude music, the Bach Prelude, please. Thank you so much, Lisa. It is indeed a real privilege and a pleasure for Margie and I to be here with you during this month of March. We'll have to tell you sometime how this came about, but it's a wonderful opportunity to be with you and to share with you thoughts and ideas about the importance of embracing diversity in this country, the theme basically of the book that was mentioned. But we begin with our call to worship, And as we begin this series about embracing diversity, this litany of restoration by Marjorie Bowens Wheatley is most appropriate. If recognizing the interdependence of all life, we strive to build community, the strength we gather will be our salvation. If you are black and I'm white, it will not matter. If you are female and I'm male, it will not matter. If you are older and I'm younger, it will not matter. If you are progressive and I'm conservative, it will not matter. If you are straight and I am gay, it will not matter. If you are Christian and I am Jewish, it will not matter. If we join spirits as brothers and sisters, the pain of our aloneness will be lessened. And that does matter. In this spirit, we build community and move toward restoration. Now, I have studied carefully the history of the flame and the chalice. And for me, it is a great privilege to light the chalice, the flame on the chalice, right now. And now to share with you these words. As we join in Ridlet's community, let us be as a flame in a living chalice. Let each of us be the fuel, hearts and minds in community. Let us be as oxygen, the breath we share, in words, music, tears, and laughter. Our opening hymn is number 402, From You I Receive. We'll sing it twice. Please rise as you're able and willing. Please be seated. During these 4 weeks, I'm going to be giving some special readings from this book called Portraits of Peace. Let me tell you something about this book. It was done by a journalist, a photographer, and a writer up in Minnesota that we've had at the church that Margie and I are members. His name is John Nolter. And knowing what was happening in this country, he went around the whole country and took photographs of different and diverse people in all parts of our country, and then listened carefully to what they had to say about their situation and about their link with our country, and their wanting to be recognized for who they were, and yet in this diversity found great joy in what they would represent as well. And so I'll be reading different parts from this book, but specifically that relate to the sermon that you'll have today, which focuses on religious diversity. So this is a reading from Portraits of Peace by John Nolter, and this title would be Stay at the Table. It comes from a discussion with Maham Khan, who on September the 11th, 2001, you'll remember that date, was president, had just become president actually, of the Muslim Student Association at her college in Illinois. And then September 11th happened all of a sudden, and she replies, "There's a whole other fear that is indescribable, that no one else, unless you are Muslim, could relate to. Not only are you afraid of what's happening, but you just immediately know that this common identity," she's speaking of her identity, "is going to be problematic. There are people who have never really sat down and had a conversation with a Muslim about what they believe. I think that's part of the problem. We fear that which we do not know and understand. The only way to know and understand is to expose. But we aren't allowed to expose because political correctness tells us not to. We have this sort of institutional problem, and I try to break that barrier. Maham said her efforts on campus worked well because people were willing to stay at the table. No matter what our struggle or conflict, when we stay engaged with one another, continue dialogue, and keep working on our relationships, there is a hope that we can find our way towards some sort of resolution. But when we walk away from the table, the hope walks away with us. So the question I have to ask myself is, when things get difficult, will you stay at the table? Yes, change in this country takes time, so we're called to stay at the table. And now I would like to invite, I think we have at least one courageous child who might be willing to come forward. And Margie and I have a special gift for you, but we do have this time for all ages, loving people of all religions. Oh, some older ones, great. Please come. That's great. And Margie, you can sit here. I'll come over here too. All right. All right. So we have for you, first I want to share with you something that will tell a little bit about what we're going to be talking about here today, the embracing of religious differences. Now this t-shirt that you see comes from a gathering that Margie and I went to in a town in Minnesota called Wilmer, Minnesota. Now that's not one of your big towns you would recognize. In fact, it's out in the country. But it's a place that is now filled with all kinds of diverse people, including people from various religions. And so you kids will see on here that there are different symbols that signify different religions. You all can kind of get an idea about it. And you recognize any of these symbols that you would think would point toward particular religions? Yeah, now that's interesting. Right away, she found the Unitarian Universalist one right here. Yes, there are Unitarian Universalists in Wilmer, Minnesota. So, yes. That's Muslim? Yeah, very good. The cross of Christianity, right? Yeah, she's really good at this. Wow, that's great. And there are a couple of others that are a little bit different. There's one that represents Baha'i, and there's one that's a kind of unusual one for Buddhism that's on here too. Often you find the Buddha when you see that. And then, what does it say on the back of this t-shirt? As you can see, what does it say? We are better together. That's the whole idea of these people coming together in this inter-religious gathering that they have frequently. And when we come together and we want to relate to each other, we need to remember what's very important to all of you folks as Unitarian Universalists, and that's the word kindness. And now Margie has something special to give to you that you can take with you. You want to mention what it says on here.
It says human with a heart and kind. Be both. Human, kind.
Yeah, so you have human, kind. Be both. Human, kind. Be both. And so we would love to have you take these with you. And we've got an extra one here too if anyone knows a friend that you'd like to. Or maybe you think that we've got several extras here. Or maybe you think your parents ought to be a little more kind sometimes. So if you would like to, you can take some more of these with you, okay? All right, you got one you want to take? Okay. Yeah, you want an extra one too? That's great. You okay? All right, we'll leave these here. Maybe somebody else would like to have one too. And before you part, I do want to mention that each week, Margie and I will be giving out some very special things to you to take home. And she tells me that the little prizes that you get, the little gifts, they get better each week. So that's incentive for you to come back, okay, next week. But don't tell your parents this, because they might think they should have certain incentives like that too. Thank you for coming up. God bless you all. We appreciate it. Oh, if you can spread some joy, let's do it, right? That's great. So now it's time for our celebrations and sorrows, and my understanding is that I take this mic and go out after I put my mask on and come to you and would invite you to share any special celebration you would have or any special sorrow that you want to share with others, and we can join you, really join you in that sense of what you're going through as well. So I will come. Anybody have something to share? Yes, please. I'll come over here. And I'm told that they're not supposed to be real long, right? Is that the idea? Right?
Hello, my name is Ben. I've got a joy saying that it's really nice to be back here for a vacation after having spent 2 years of not doing so due to the pandemic.
Oh, great. Wonderful, Ben. Welcome back. Where have you been?
Stuck at home in Massachusetts, pretty much. Yeah, although last year I ended up going to Texas instead of here. Bit of a long story, but it's nice to be back here for a week.
Wonderful to be back here. We'll have to check on your time in Massachusetts as well. That's great. Anybody else, please, wants to share? Yes.
I want to say hooray for Wilmer. I'm from Minnesota, and a good friend of mine lives in Wilmer, and he built a windmill and gets his own water. And I would like to have his help down here because my water is not good.
All right. Well, we have 10,000 lakes in Minnesota too. A lot of water up there. Wilmer, that's amazing. That's great. Wonderful. Yes, Nan.
I'm Nan. This is kind of a joy and a sorrow. This is my last Sunday until next December, because I'm off hitting the road again. And I live in a van, so I travel around. So, yeah, goodbye to everybody.
Well, God be with you, and we'll think of you. I'm sure the people will keep you in their hearts and minds as well. Safe travels, right? Anybody else? We've got, yes. First, okay, we'll head this way. I get good exercise coming around. That's good.
I just wanted to give some praise to the Green Committee, the Garden Committee. I was here in a meeting on Thursday, sitting in the sanctuary, and they were very busy pruning, cleaning out. I can't remember everybody, but I wish they would stand up, and they've been spearheaded by a very new intent, Barbara. But the other thing, please, as you leave church today, if you have not, there are 4 wonderful pots of greenery as you enter the lanai, and that was all done Thursday by that committee, the Greens group.
Let's have the Green Committee. Stand, please. Right. Anybody here? Yes. Right. There they are. Yep. And I think I saw another hand over here. Was there? You got it. Oh, you're pointing at her. Okay. Okay. I think Pam had her hand out over here. Okay. Yep. There you go, Pam.
Hi, I have a joy and a concern. The joy is we have installed a new audio system for people with hearing aids. You can pick up the card and the thing. The sorrow is I can't figure out how to work it. But I promise I will learn this week, and hopefully next Sunday we can have a little class.
All right, thank you, Pam. Anybody else? One over here. Sorry. Dave.
Just as a response to Pam, I'm on this audio fetch today for audio for my hearing aids. It's wonderful. It's the best thing yet. So if you want help, see me afterwards.
That's great. Can you turn them off during the sermon? No, that's good. So anybody else? Yes, please.
My name's Lorraine, and this is just a little something, but in the way things are going on in the world, it's nice to focus on something positive. My dog passed his test to become a therapy dog.
Well, and what's the name of your dog?
Barkley.
Barkley. Well, tell Barkley congratulations for us. That's good. Anyone else? Yes, go in the back here. All right.
Hello, I'm speaking for Kim and Matt McHugh, my younger sister from New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and flew in with my mom, and they just spent 9 days with us, and Matt and I have already driven to Tampa International Airport this morning, and we're still here.
All right, very good. All right, thanks for all that wonderful sharing. Anyone else? Well, I understand that usually at this time there's at least a time for a brief prayer. And I can understand that we've had wonderful expressions of celebration and good things happening, some transitions in life. Let us all remember those people as they're going through those times. But I want us today to also take a moment of prayer, each in his or her own way, for the people of Ukraine. We need to remember them. I know there are fundraisers for them, and wonderful to see this church already doing that. But let us take time. It's hard, isn't it, to watch what we see on TV and what they're going through. So a moment of your silent prayers as we remember those people and all they're going through in the face of evil. Thank you all. Before giving the sermon each time over these 4 weeks, I'm going to be doing just a very brief reading from the book that I authored along with my wonderful colleague, Daryl Jodock, and called Embracing Diversity, Faith, Vocation, and the Promise of America. And I've picked usually just one short paragraph that will relate to the sermon that you'll soon be hearing on each particular day. This is a reading focusing on the issue of embracing religious diversity. Faith is relational. What this suggests is that we need to get to know how our neighbors in another religion experience their relationships with the divine. What claim does that relationship make on the way they interact with others and with the world? Just as there are diverse ways Christians understand and practice their faith, so there are diverse ways those in other religions understand and practice theirs. As helpful as it is to study and learn the basic teaching of another religion, it is even more important come to know the people who practice it, we then can see that it is a way of life, not just a set of ideas to be endorsed or rejected. We continue now with our interlude. we embark on 4 weeks of tackling one of the greatest challenges that this country has, that we face right now. And that is the challenge of embracing the growing diversity in America, and especially racial and religious diversity. Diversity of other kinds, to be sure. But I believe that those issues are at the heart of what is dividing many of us in this country, and what we're all called to do something about, to seek to overcome, and to get to the point where we can truly embrace this wonderful diversity that we can have in this country. And it's going to be up to us, though, people like yourselves, this congregation, other congregations around the country, local communities. That's where the local change, that's where the change really takes place. It's been historically so in this country for change to take place. And to emphasize that, I'd like to tell a little story. It's kind of a personal story, but it will make the point about why this all comes back to us. Now, I have a grandson by the name of Cameron. He's now a freshman in high school, and he's just been finishing playing on his basketball team, his freshman basketball team. Now, I knew that would happen in his life, so when he was about 4 or 5 years old, well, I started practicing for him, getting out there to bounce the basketball. And we were doing that one day there in our home in Minnesota. And it was kind of a warm day. Yes, it does get warm in Minnesota sometimes. And practicing, and we got a little thirsty, and so we thought we'd head in and get something to drink. And as we were walking along, I happened to notice there on the concrete that there was a penny, a nice shiny penny, and I picked it up. I said, Cameron, look, I found a penny. And I started to put it in my pocket. And he says, wait, Grandpa, that's my penny. And I looked at him and says, well, Cameron, how do you know it's your penny? He says, well, look at it, Grandpa. Does it have a picture of Abraham Lincoln on it? He says, well, yes. And he says, then it's my penny. You see, Cameron wanted to take ownership of that, to make sure that it was his. And that is what we're going to call all of us to do, to take ownership of this issue, of this challenge for our country, so we can all begin to embrace our diversity. And you folks can be, as Unitarian Universalists in many ways, at the forefront of that. Now, over this next 4 weeks, we'll be looking at different kinds of diversity. Today, as I mentioned, religious diversity. Next week, we'll focus on racial diversity. And then the third week, we're going to tackle one of the real fundamental problems that we face in this country, and that's the misunderstanding of freedom, what it means over against responsibility for our country. And my colleague, Daryl Joduk, is going to join me in that third week, as after the service, we'll have an adult forum related to our whole book. And he's going to bring some extra books along and that kind of thing. If anybody wants to have that and wants to get it signed, we can do that together. And then the final week will be exciting, because we're going to talk about joy. The joy that can come from experiencing diversity and then beginning to share that with other people. But today, we're talking about religious diversity. Now, let's start with the scene. In 2008, my wife Margie and I were in Jerusalem. We were there part of a study tour in Jerusalem and Bethlehem and all over Palestine and Israel. And we would be awakened in the morning by hearing the very loud loudspeaker that would come from one of the nearby mosques, calling the Muslims in that part of Jerusalem to prayer. And then, a little later in the day, we'd hear the church bells ringing from Christian churches or some of the larger cathedrals in Jerusalem or in Bethlehem. And then later in the day, we would go to the Western Wall, or the Wailing Wall, the remains of the Jewish temple. And we would take a little slip of paper and write a prayer on that piece of paper and put it in the cracks, one of the cracks in the Wailing Wall. Jewish, Christian, Muslim. They live day to day to day besides each other. And to be sure, over the many years, there have been all kinds of wars and battles and killings of people who were crowded in that same part of the world. But at the same time when we were there, we were able to talk with people of all those faiths, listen carefully to them and understand that they too often had great respect for each other and for each other's faith in spite of all those difficulties. And so when we got back to this country, I wrote an article that was called Faith and Tolerance, and it was published by our national Lutheran church, Lutheran magazine. And I called it Faith and Tolerance because of what we'd experienced, that there were people who were willing to tolerate other people's faith and still hold on to their own faith strongly. Now, since I've come back, and over the last several years, I've begun to understand that tolerance is not enough. That we have to go beyond tolerance to actually appreciating others' faiths. And then even further than that, to beginning to embrace, to find joy in that exchange with each other as they express their faith and we express our faiths. So the question, though, is how? How do we begin to make that happen? How do we embrace religious diversity? Well, I've developed for the comments here today 4 specific ideas, 4 steps on the road, if you will, to embracing religious diversity among ourselves and in this country. And the first, as you see, is to understand the nature of faith itself. Now, why is that important? Because there are so many people in this country who approach faith by looking only at their doctrines or their set of beliefs or even their customs. And then they declare, well, these are the right things, and all the other people, they've got the wrong things. That does not introduce yourself to dialogue very well with people of other faiths. And then there is the whole problem of the misuse of faith that's occurred for years and centuries and still comes back to haunt us today. To be sure, we saw that with the Islamic State that wanted to have a piece of land that said, and only Muslims of their particular kind could even live there. The rest could not. But the same thing can happen in this country, and has, unfortunately, in recent years, with the emergence, and even stronger in recent years, of what we call Christian nationalism, by those people who believe that this was supposed to be a Christian country, even though that was never in our doctrines and never the case among our founders. But they have this false idea that it's supposed to be that way, and the country ought to be controlled by Christians, or a certain kind of Christians even, along the way. That is not faith. That is not the essence of faith. In the book that Daryl and I have written, we talk about faith as trust, and faith as displayed in relationships, loving relationships, a loving relationship between yourself and the person that which you identify as your God, your source, your divine inspiration. That relationship that has to be a loving relationship, and then the relationship that's a loving relationship with other people that you can have as well. That is the essence of faith. Now, you folks, as Unitarian Universalists, you've got a head start in that because you've always had this great appreciation, your openness to people of other faiths. And you can take leadership in that regard as well. That's so critical, it's important. And it's that understanding of faith that people arrive by faith to gain their faith, not by some kind of set of rules and regulations or scientific proof that yours is the best, better than anybody else's, and instead of understanding the mystery and the awe that is there among all of us who have this spiritual sense of life. It was Soren Kierkegaard who said that all of us must make that, by the way, Soren Kierkegaard, I'm a Dane by background, and Kierkegaard is also Danish, as you know. And he, of course, had made the famous statement, you have to approach by making a leap of faith at some point. And that is true for all of us. And if we have that sense that that is the place of faith, then we have an openness to reaching out to other people as well and listening carefully to their leap of faith while we explain our leap of faith as well. That's the first step along the way. Does that take away from your own faith when you engage with others? No. In fact, many people have found it strengthens their faith because they have to think about it a little bit more as they engage with others. The second step then we'll go on to is to overcome false ideas about other faiths. Now, many of you might know and remember well, where were you on September 11th, on 9/11? How many of you remember exactly where you were? Everybody does. Well, I was at that time head of Scholarship America. I was on my way to a staff meeting and saw what was happening at the Twin Towers there in New York City. And we as a staff said, like everybody else in the country, what can we do to help to make a difference to all these people who are being killed and their families? We decided to do something out of what we did best, which was scholarships. And we went to a number of our corporate partners and foundation partners we'd worked with, communities we'd been working with around the country to create scholarship funds for kids and young adults to help them go on to school. And we decided that if we could get help from them, and we did, we would establish what became known as the Families of Freedom Scholarship Fund for the sons and the daughters and the spouses of those who were killed or permanently disabled as a result of 9/11. And we were able to raise money not just in this country but around the whole world, because many people don't realize that there were persons from 80 different countries who were killed in those Twin Towers. And so we started giving out scholarships to those families, and they still are doing it, by the way, because some of those kids were just born right after, within 9 months after 9/11. And many of them were Muslims. And so I got to know a number of those Muslim families, and they explained to me, well, we have a double problem that we've faced. One, we're suffering because of what happened to our family. But now we're suffering when we go to the grocery store and people see us and they'll shy away from us, or some will even leave the store because they're afraid that we're radicalized Muslims. And so these false understandings began to happen. And also there's a false understanding that happens when we look at, many times, at people of other religions in other countries, and we translate that to this country. And say, well, the people here of that religion must be like those people over there. But that's not true. Let's take what's happening in Hinduism right now. If you are familiar with what's happening in India, the country of India, under the current regime there is this bent toward making India a stronger and stronger Hindu country. And there is discrimination against Christians and against other Muslims and against Buddhists. But the people, the Hindus that you talk to in this country, they do not agree with that, because they see within Hinduism also this bent toward being open to other people's religions. So we can't generalize in that way, nor can you generalize about the different kinds of people from different religions in this country. Take Buddhism, for example. There are all kinds of wonderful temples throughout this whole country of different kinds. And the same thing is true with the Muslim religion. Did you know that there are Muslims who come from 77 different countries to America? And so you might guess their Muslimism is not the same in each and every one of those places. So we need to, yes, overcome some of our false ideas about all these other faiths. And then let's go on to the third specific step, to increase personal actions and hear the stories. You heard a little bit about what happens here in this town. Wonderful town. Glad to hear that we have these representation there from Wilmer, Minnesota. Yes. And what they do in their particular gathering, their interfaith gatherings, is that they mainly sit and tell stories to each other about their particular religion and their particular life and what the religion is, the impact it has on their personal lives. Just to read about somebody's faith, that's not good enough. But to have that interchange with people makes a giant, giant difference. And so what's happened there in Wilmer is this. They have a kind of semi-requirement that after they go through those discussions, they're supposed to take at least 2 of those stories and go back to their home church or their family or their community organization and share those stories. So over time that begins to create a different kind of culture within the community as people get to know and care and be kind to each other. So that's important to hear the personal actions stories. So let's go on then to the 4th one, which is then to join with others to use the power of faith for good. Many of you will recall what happened just several years ago now in Pittsburgh, when there were 11 Jewish folks who were killed by some crazy guy who had inbred in his mind over many years to be an anti-Semite. And he killed 11 people in the Jewish synagogue there in Pittsburgh. But the follow-up was amazing what happened. There were so many Christians, not just Jews, who came to help those folks. But did you realize that the Muslims in that community, and with help from others too, they raised over $330,000 to pay for all the funerals of those people who were killed in that synagogue. That was people of differing faiths coming together. And the same thing can happen time and time again. In our book, we talk about, for example, the Sikhs and what they have done to help people in this country. Now, lots of people don't understand much about the Sikhs. You don't hear about them a lot, but they are the 5th largest religious group in all of the world. And they have, for example, in California, in one of the counties there, they took the leadership in reaching out to provide food for the homeless and organize other people to work with them. So whenever you have a chance to join with others in serving the common good, it allows you to get to know those other people in so many special ways as you are being kind to each other together. You also can exchange stories along the way. And then obviously you're going to be doing a lot of good. But it could do some great good for a church like this and so many others as well. We're trying to attract some younger people, because younger people in this country have become very discouraged in looking at organized religion, and that we don't always live up to what we preach and what we teach. But if we're out there and we're active in serving other people, then they may be attracted to come and be a part of what we're seeking to do. So those are the 4 steps that I recommend. But I'd like to close then with one final story. It's a personal story that I think maybe, though, can highlight what we're trying to accomplish in this country overall, to truly embrace diversity. This is a story that comes in a very personal way. We have our oldest child is a son by the name of Bill, like mine, and he's lived in Boston for quite a few years. In fact, a number of years ago, for 15 years in a row, he was the director of premium seating for the New England Patriots football team. Some of you might have heard about this team because they did send down a quarterback to Tampa to help you win the Super Bowl just the last time around. So we knew that he'd been dating, but then he called and says, well, I'm really serious, Mom and Dad, about a particular young woman. And I said, great, what's her name? And he says, it's Nancy Shapiro. And I said, well, I was thinking that's probably not a Christian name and probably not a Scandinavian name. And sure enough, he introduced her. She's just a wonderful, beautiful, very bright, very caring Jewish young woman. And they decided that they would get engaged and get married. And they approached me to say, well, would you be willing to officiate at our wedding? And I said, well, sure, and I assume that you'd like to also have a rabbi join me, right? And they looked at me and says, no, we just want you to do it. So, uh-oh. So then my job was to put together a Jewish-Christian wedding. I don't know if you've anybody been to a Jewish wedding? Oh, okay. You know what it's like then, right? All the kinds of special things that you go through, and the breaking of the glass, and the fun afterwards, and all of that. So I put together this service that included all those things, and obviously some from the Christian point of view as well. But I asked about, well, what about my message? Can I still give a message? Because I like to do that, a short one. And they said, well, yes, but it has to be under 5 minutes. I said, okay. So what I decided to do was, instead of like giving us a little sermon, was to write a letter to my son and future daughter-in-law. And it was a letter that I have here, a copy, that they could then take out later on if they ran into problems in their marriage and read again. And the letter emphasizes 3 very important things about marriage and sustaining marriage, all that begin with the letter F, including family, the importance of family and the attachment to family, fidelity, importance of loyalty, and the third one was faith. And I want to read just a couple of paragraphs about faith and the fact that there would be 2 faiths would be joined together. I said to Bill and Nancy, your marriage brings together 2 rich faith traditions. They are 2 traditions, and yet they are also one. For you, they connect you with the same God. You have made a wise commitment to continue to honor, respect, and keep both of these traditions. Your lives will be enriched by the scriptures, the ceremonies, the practices, the perspectives, and especially the values of these traditions. If each of you maintains a strong faith, your marriage will be strong, and it will remain strong. As a Jewish marriage tradition of the breaking of the glass signifies, God does not promise that you will be free from difficult times in life, but God does promise he'll be with you. And the psalmist says, God is our refuge and strength. And the Apostle Paul has written, nothing will be able to separate us from the love of God. In sorrow and celebration, God will be with you as you continue to acknowledge the presence, his presence, in church and synagogue. In your home and in your daily lives, your faith will strengthen your marriage. This is the promise of faith. So you see, today, all of us have this challenge before us. Challenge that says to the rest of the world out there that there is a country where people can come together, they can live together, though they're of different religions. They can love together, though they are different in religious background. And they can serve together to help all kinds of people. So I challenge all of us, take ownership. Take ownership so we can all do our part in helping to embrace diversity in this country. May it be so, or I, yes, as a pastor often say, amen, which also means, may it be so. Amen. And now our closing hymn is number 170. We are a gentle, angry people. Stand as you are able.
Mercy
And now the chalice is extinguished. Its light go with us into the world. And now receive this benediction. And now, since the struggle deepens, since evil abides, and good does not yet prosper, let us gather what strength we have, what confidence and valor, that our small victories may end in triumph, and the world awaited be a world attained. And may I add these words, and yes, go in peace, seek to embrace diversity. Amen.